heyday of local kids shows are a few other favorites. He got his start as Commodore Cappy with his sidekick Willie Ketchum as Clancy the Cop. Welcome John Gallus. And also someone distinguished as the only existing kids TV host seen in Minnesota today, Captain 11 himself, Dave Dedrick from Sioux Falls. Captain 11, I feel like I'm 7 years old. After 32 years on television, I have to ask you, do you still get the same pleasure from doing it as you did when you started?
I really do, and I have one thing to say. I haven't figured out what I want to be when I grow up yet. I love it every day.
Oh, well, here we have Captain 11 on. How about for the two of you, John and Roger, your shows aren't on the air. They didn't survive. Why not, Roger? One of the things you mentioned was Action for Children's Television.
Well, that's a question. I really don't know why we're still not on the air. We went through a phase when all the television stations had a lot of children's shows. Then, within a period of 2, 3, 4 years, they're all gone. One of them, I mentioned Action for Children's Television. They thought it was too much clout to have a children's character do the commercials and buy this product. And I think it really was a mistake, as I said, because we always, I think, handled it gently. I think we tried to do it with taste. We didn't order kids to buy. We asked. And I don't know why they went off, because they were very profitable shows. They were easy and cheap to produce, and we did all the producing and everything. You know, we did the whole show. We had a budget of 0. And you asked me, why did it go off? I really don't know why it went off.
Well, Roger, John, let me bring you into this. Let me ask you this. Were you an educator or were you an entertainer?
I think the concept of these children's shows, Jan, was to entertain primarily. But then we suddenly realized that children by the thousands were hanging on every word. And, of course, I had the benefit of wearing a policeman's uniform, and I was able to introduce little traffic rules, safety rules, don't be picked up by strangers. And we got into some educational aspects. One of the things I am proudest of was giving book reviews every day for children of many different age groups. And the librarians would call CCO and say, hey, the kids came in and asked for the book that Clancy reviewed. I grew up loving books when I was a child, before TV, and I felt we were taking them away from books. So this was one way that I could kind of pay them back, so to speak. Talking about commercials, though, the children love to be involved in commercials. But it could be dangerous. Like the day I held up the box of Wheaties and said, kids, what's your favorite breakfast cereal? And before they all yelled Wheaties, a fat kid in the front row yelled, cream of wheat! So, you know, there were hazards involved.
Live television.
Do you have some other, perils of, and that's another thing. This was live television that you were doing, right? Which, by the way, hasn't really been preserved. I mean, I can't go to a file cabinet and pull out any old tape of Casey Jones, can I?
No, I think we all started much before videotape. When videotape came in, that was a revelation, a marvelous new invention. So we did all of our shows live. And I know I did 3 one-hour shows live each day for a number of years. And you can't save everything. And you just, you do it, you do them live, and those things that you do tape, they have to use the tape over again, and you couldn't keep those.
Roger, would a show like yours work today? We know that Captain 11 works, but it is, as folks in Sioux Falls say, an institution. Starting today, would a show like yours work?
I think so. Some shows have tried to make it come back, and they didn't make it. I think you have to update it. I think you have to use a lot of the new technical advances. You watch television today, there's 1,000 things happening in a minute. You watch a commercial, there's probably 40 different shots in 60 seconds. It's much faster moving. We had a slower, easier pace, I think, but it was more gentle, and I think you could come across more as a person.
To survive, though, Dave, do you, for example, do commercials on your program, Captain 11?
In uniform, no.
You don't in uniform?
No.
So
I have one commercial that insisted on having me, and I put on my street clothes and went to the twirly-gig of the time converter and came back in my street clothes, which is legitimate then.
So let me get back to that, because you were talking about that earlier, and that is if you want to continue to do the program, and children do, I think, hang on every word, can you put on Casey Jones again without your having to do commercials? Is that financially feasible?
Well, Yes, because I think the show could be commercial, could be successful. They would run film commercials rather than me doing. I used to do 10, 15 live commercials in a show. Well, those days are gone. Local announcers at the television stations, we all used to do lots and lots of commercials live. Well, that doesn't happen today. Everything is produced by an agency. Those days are gone.
Let me ask one last question very quickly. John, you and Roger, if you had the chance tomorrow to start a new show, would you do it?
Depends on the show, and also the fact that today it costs much more to produce local live television than it did back in the old days when we had a budget, I think, of $3.50 a week.
Roger?
My answer is yes, and I can start tomorrow.
Okay.
You know what, Rich, I gotta say this. I'm sorry, but I'm in heaven. I'm here with my childhood heroes.
Well, we all know Captain 11 can control time.
That's
we
right.
can't. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
Our pleasure.
If you are interested in reading more about children's television and how it might affect your family, we suggest the following books: The ACT Guide to Children's Television by Evelyn Kay, TV On-Off, Better Family Use of Television by Ellen B. DeFranco, and Growing Up on Television by Kate Moody. We also highly recommend a book written by Fred Rogers, host of the PBS series Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, entitled Mr. Rogers Talks with Parents. This book includes a chapter specifically about children and television, addressing common concerns of parents. A special resource has been written for child care providers and parents called the Mr. Rogers Plan and Playbook. This daily activity guide is designed to accompany the daily broadcasts of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and includes many suggestions for fun and educational activities for children. These and other resources are listed in KTCA TV's Let's Watch It Together, a brochure written for parents, daycare providers, and others interested in tips on how to share television with children and use TV more constructively. This is available free by calling 612-642-1980. That number again is 612-642-1980. Let's Watch It Together was written as a part of KTCA's Survive project.
Well, we've heard from parents who have worries about television, and we've heard from hosts of the old kids' TV shows who miss the production of local shows. Now it's time to talk to the people who make the decisions about what children actually see. We have with us two television executives, Ron Hanberg, General Manager of WCCO Television, Channel 4, and Art Ludwig, Program Manager of KARE-TV, Channel 11. Also joining us is Sheila Moriarty, head of the Minnesota Council on Children, Youth, and Families. Ron Hanberg, why isn't Clancy on Channel 4 anymore?
Well, I guess because, like the world, television changes, tastes change. I think the time kind of just has bypassed Clancy and the other children's characters. Expectations from children and parents have changed. There were great, wonderful moments in those days, but I think the expectations are so different they just wouldn't work today.
Art Ludwig, let me ask you, because you've been at Channel 11 for many years. You just saw the street segment and the affection that people who grew up with Casey Jones demonstrated, and you heard Roger Awesome tell us he would do it tomorrow. Would you consider bringing him back?
I don't think so, not at this time, because as Ron says, many things have changed since those days. I think the expectations of television are much increased. You also heard them say that their budget was very limited, and the creativity to do 3 hours of television and do a quality job just doesn't exist. As we know television.
Is it really
today.
a matter of cost, though? Are those programs expensive to produce?
It isn't much matter of the cost of the shows themselves. It's the amount of time you'd have to do the rehearsal, the crews, and so on and so forth, the writing. It would take a great deal of time, much more than you did in those days when everything was live and you did them. The way they came out, that was what you went on the air with. Now you'd have to tape them, I think.
That's what really the Sesame Streets and the other more sophisticated children's programs have done. They have created in children a belief that unless they're of that quality, the production quality, the cost that they don't have the same kind of value to them or interest. I really believe that.
So you don't think my 6-year-old, for example, would get the same thrill of going down to the station to be on Captain 11's show for his birthday?
Oh, yes, I think they would. I think what you see in the faces of those adults who are so beautiful as they talk about what happened to them in their earlier times is that this was a trusted friend, somebody they related to, somebody that they knew and felt familiar with. And I think what's important for our little kids particularly is they have a sense of community. They grow up in a neighborhood. We know that from all the child care studies that parents prefer to have their kid in a small area. So I think this immediacy of the television is what really, and the local hero factor, I think.
So if you had your way, Sheila, you would want to convince Ron and Art that they should resume local productions of children's shows?
I would wish that as communities we could really try to, the factor of money and how much it costs is, I'm sure, a consideration, but I think it's partly because the public needs to be more informed about it. We need to have people who really will respond when people put good programs on like that. I was thinking the other day about how often we always watch our local news at night before we go to sleep. That seems sort of something we just take for granted. We never watch the national NBC, ABC, whatever. Those are sort of that mass media global village. We don't want to hear anymore about Beirut or bombings. It's the same with families and with children. We need something that brings us together in touch with our community.
I don't disagree that that the 2-year-old or the 6-year-old would love to be with Clancy again or with Roger Awesome. The problem is that other children, the kind of audience a commercial television station needs to sustain a program like that, simply don't get the same kind of satisfaction from those shows, from seeing other 6-year-olds enjoying themselves that they once did. The expectations, again, have changed, truly.
Look at the competition you have now for children's interests. Video games, computers, home video, this type of thing that all would compete for that age of child that used to be watching television. You would probably still, unless they get the younger ones, the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. But the older ones, I think it wouldn't be sophisticated enough for them.
Why do you need the older ones, by the way? Is this because they can they exercise or exert more influence on their parents to buy the products that will make sure there are sufficient commercials to pay for this
It's all
program?
part of it, sure it is.
Sure.
No question about it. You know, we tried, for several years, we produced a show called Incredible Kids, aimed at a range from about 8 to 16. And we had enormous difficulty finding a place on the schedule where we could get the kids to watch. It was a wonderful program with all kinds of quality, educational, friendly kinds of things. But to try to find a place competing against other cartoons, other children's programs, at a time of day when children were available, almost impossible to attract the children's audience.
Art, let me ask you, if I may. You saw a few moments ago and listened to a group of parents talking about their concerns for children's television. Violence, the passive learning of children, commercialism. Are we just retreading familiar ground? I'm sure you've been getting letters and calls from parents for many, many years. Are these new issues?
No, they're
or
not.
Are these old issues?
They're the same issues that we were addressing years and years ago, and they haven't gone away.
Have they been addressed, do you
I
believe?
think they have. I think, for instance, in most of the, for instance, cartoons, which at one time was probably received the most complaints, were the old theatrical cartoons that did have, if you want to call it violence, the Road Runners and this type of thing, but most of the cartoons that are being produced today are being produced with children in mind. And you don't have that. They're being produced for television audiences.
Now, in raising that programs are being produced with children in mind, Ron Hanberg, your station, as an affiliate of CBS, is scheduled to begin airing a cartoon series called The Garbage Pail Kids.
Right.
It's received at least some local protests, and I understand nationally there's been some outcries about this program. It's a program of cartoon characters that are engaged in gross, ugly sort of behavior. Are you serious about airing that program without screening it, not only by yourself, but perhaps by the Sheila Moriartys of the world?
Our plans now are absolutely to screen it. We have not yet been shown a copy from CBS. The CBS children's program people, whom I trust and have learned to trust over the years, reassure us as affiliates that it is not going to be like the cards. It's going to be an irreverent but wholesome, appropriate show for children. The proof is going to be in the pudding when we actually see it. We plan not only to have the station management look at it, but a cross-section of station employees, parents of young children, and perhaps go out into the community if it seems controversial enough and seek out opinions. There is no way we're going to put on a show that's inappropriate at that time of Saturday morning for kids in those age groups.
Well, Ron, this raises what I think for many parents like myself is perhaps a practical question. How much control does a Channel 4 have in deciding whether or not to air an
Absolute control. We can carry or not carry any program that CBS offers. In fact, we have the responsibility to make that decision. We hesitate to preempt or to cancel shows because of our taste versus to impose our taste, but we have absolute control.
And realistically, how many calls or concerns does it take to have you rethink a decision like?
It isn't really the number of calls, truthfully. We have, in some occasions, on some programs, gotten as many as 5,000 calls, not for children's programs, and have not made the decision to take the program off. It's really a question of our own.
I'd like to say something. I think a lot of people think that there are robots at television stations who make these decisions, and they aren't. They're people who have families, who have children, and we have a program that we have a question about. It isn't just me who looks at it. It's many members of the staff, and many of them with children. We have young women working for us who have children of their own. We all look at the program. We're the days, but the days are human beings,
Yes,
and we're aware and cognizant of problems of children.
One of the things that we all have to remember is it's ideal to think that every little child has a parent next to them that helps them interpret and turn the monitor off and all. But the reality is there are numbers of kids who are really tuned into that television without any chaperoning at all. And we always have to remember that because it's a real heavy leadership role that program managers have to play in that.
Sheila, do you wish that you and others like you in the community would be asked by the Rons and the Arts of the world to preview children's programming and make recommendations?
I wish that parents and program managers could get better partnerships struck between them. I think parents have to take more responsibility to work together and be more informed about what's going on in television. I think program managers have to do what Art and Ron have been saying. They have to work, really seek the community out and give parents a fair chance.
All right. On that note, we must end. But Ron, Art, and Sheila, thank you all for joining us very much. You cannot think about children's television without thinking about Mr. Rogers. He has been in the business for years, making visits, as he calls them, to children across America. He was in town recently, and we had a chance to ask his opinion about children's television and what our concerns should be.
There are children who, if their parents, not thinking, should pull the plug and have the water start going down before they take their child out, their child might just scream because they're not old enough to know that that drain's just that big and that they couldn't get sucked down. Now, I've seen television cartoons that depict a diver going down the bottom of a lake, pulling a plug at the bottom of the lake, and having the water go down that drain, sucking all of the boats and the fish and the shore and the houses and everything, having it all go down that drain. I've seen that on television. And I've thought all the years that I've tried to help children realize that that can't happen. What needs to be is an adult with that cartoon, if it must be shown, saying this is just pretend. That could never happen in real life. You can never go down the drain. We need to be able to offer a smorgasbord of ways for people to say who they are and what they feel. We need to offer that through television. Not everybody's going to choose the dance. Not everybody's going to want to play a trumpet. Not everybody is going to be a sculptor or a quilter, but somebody might all of a sudden see something on television and say, that's for me. Children love to belong. and they love to know what belonging means. So if parents will say, this is what it's going to be for us in our family. It might not be for the neighbors, but this is how much television you may watch. Why, then the children, after a while, will accept that. And they will grow to know that they had parents who gave them comfortable limits. I know children who have been terrified in front of a television set. And the parents have come in and turned off the television and said, now we're just going to talk about it, and you're not going to have to see that. It was beyond them. It was beyond the children to be able to turn it off. It was too frightening. And so it all is a matter of care. But how many parents have the time to do such monitoring? It puts an added burden on parenting. But it's there, and so we have to accept it.
So we're left with a clear understanding that kids are here to stay, and most likely, so is television. So our job is to help understand how they can live together. We've seen tonight how our local programmers view their responsibility, but that's only a small part of the story. What about the national creators and producers who make these programs, especially when their shows are seen across the U.S. and all over the world? Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. on a very unusual edition of Almanac Extra, we'll be linking up with the studios of Channel 4 London. On the other side of the Atlantic will be parents, psychologists, and other critics of the latest kids shows now flooding Britain from the U.S. Here in Minnesota, we will have some of the producers of those shows for what promises to be a spirited hour of debate. Join us tomorrow night at 7 for Almanac Extra, and also this coming Saturday morning at 9 a.m. for a special Minnesota Kids TV Nostalgia Hour featuring highlights of some vintage local shows. So we leave you tonight with one of the moments that made those shows so memorable to so many of us. For Jan Smaby, I'm Richard Neuner. Good night.
Happy, happy birthday to every girl and boy. Hope this very special day brings you lots of joy. Hope this birthday present you get from mom and dad will make this very special day the best you've ever had. Happy birthday to every girl and boy. Hope this very special day brings you lots of joy. Hope the birthday presents you get from mom and dad will make this very special day the best you've ever had. Happy birthday!
Almanac Extra is part of the Survive Project, made possible by grants from the Pillsbury Company Foundation and the Northwest Area Foundation. Additional funding is provided by the James R. Thorpe Foundation, First Banks, members of First Bank System, and the Minneapolis Star and Tribune and its newspaper and education program serving Minnesota schools.